Yeah, that's how it started. See, the tyrants of Iran are used to the occasional protest, to their own people warning them that there are limits to the oppression that can be withstood. But then the leader of the free world had to tell those desperate freedom fighters that the United States of America was locked and loaded, that if they but took to the streets and their government killed them again, as they had every previous time, this time, this time, their saviors would declare war to make the tyrants stop. But President Liar is a liar, and that was a lie. When the protests reached a fever pitch and everything hung in a balance, when those bravest, the leaders of the movement, led the people onto the streets, stuck out their necks, ready to die if that was what it took to break the tyrants, the promise of war and intervention didn't come. When January 8th and January 9th rolled on and the protests raged, and Iran gave the order to murder thousands of their own people, what the freedom fighters of Iran got was bluster, more threats. To quote the famous book, words are wind. They came out into the open because free Iranians believed they wouldn't stand alone, as they had and have every time previously and since. Imagine what that was like to a parent, to be a parent of someone out in the streets, to hear from someone you love that this was the chance, that it must be now, because the US would come, and be faced with prisons and funerals for your bravery and the courage of those you loved. Because your rulers are monstrous tyrants and President Liar lied. Because to him, thousands of innocent Iranian lives mattered less than something else. What else? What could it have been? Perhaps, they wondered, there was a good answer. Something they didn't know or hadn't thought of. A payoff worthy of their sacrifice. They finally got their answer on February 28th, almost 2 months after the worst massacres which allegedly murdered thousands, if not tens of thousands, in but 2 days. Because the death of thousands of innocent Iranian freedom fighters wasn't enough to call the US to war. The chance to kill their enemies, to decapitate the Iranian government and maybe, in their opinion, win the war then and there, that was what finally moved Donald to war. And we, and they, and everyone now know the US and its military value the death of its enemies above the lives of thousands of innocents. There are many arguments why this might be, some of them perhaps even good ones. Perhaps this is actually how you save more lives, or that's what they thought. But none of them change the fact that for everyone who lost someone in those marches and protests, it is bitter, bitter. It is a bitter, bitter reward. Well, outcome. Killing their enemies months later does help, but it doesn't save those who risked everything, or bring back those lost or crippled by the oppressors. Because they look to the US and what do they see? They see an enemy of their enemy, not a true ally. Just one of convenience. One who did not live up to their own stated principles, did not act as heroes or saviors, dare to help. America first, they now say, openly. The US lives were valued above those of foreign innocents. That's not wrong. This is not judgment or condemnation. Their soldiers are soldiers, not superheroes nor saints. It's a practical, pragmatic judgment call for a nation to protect its own citizens. But when so many news carry messages of that same president calling for those same freedom fighters and civilians to now rise up, after he starts the war when he wants it, when it's convenient and best for him, well, they look to their dead. They look to their predecessors. others who the US aided as long as they were killing their enemies, but didn't fight beside, as brothers and sisters in arms. And they see the same war book, the same method, the same outcomes. They are not friends, they just have a shared enemy. So when that foreign president calls for them to fight, they make the same judgment he and his generals did, that risking their lives to save the lives of American soldiers, to spare the US and other foreign targets, to save the world and US economy, well, that's something someone fighting for principles, an idealist, a leader would do. Most of those were broken, arrested, or killed, while the US and Israel were waiting for the perfect shot, and getting all their ducks in a row for this war. The rest? The rest do as they did. They sit, wait, and watch, getting all of their ducks in a row, waiting for whatever is their perfect opportunity. The chance they take will give them victory. If that means more dead foreigners, more strife and economic instability, suffering, that's only the practical, pragmatic judgment call for them to make for themselves. So as not to put themselves and mar their cause with the same brush that considers the murder of little girls acceptable collateral. Because nothing hurts ideals and popular support for a movement like siding with the government that likes to support the kidnapping, abuse, and murder of little girls, in war and peace. Which is tragic irony, because it is clear from the calls for rebellion and revolution from the start of the war that Donald and Israel planned to decapitate the existing government in the hopes of a popular one replacing it. That's why they started this war. That was their winning shot, their strategy for this short, victorious war. If that phrase, short, victorious war, doesn't ring alarm bells in your head, you should Google it. I'll just paraphrase an old book. The belief in the possibility of a short, decisive war appears to be one of the most ancient and dangerous of human delusions. That belief of how good and easy wars were, how glorious and righteous goals could be accomplished with certainty through decisive action. It was widespread and popular before World War I and caused World War II, because military solutions only last as long as the military that enforces them, and the will to use it. World War II taught that to Europe. Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan together couldn't teach it to the US government, or its people. And so, President Lear promised to go to war, certain he would win it. So certain he was that he let thousands of innocents perish for the chance to start the war as well as he knew how. Only to it turned out that the very people he needed to put boots on the ground and win his war no longer trusted nor believed in his promises. Instead, they learned from his example and are happy to wait for him to kill their enemies, their oppressors, as long as it takes. Don't begrudge them their caution. They are survivors of years, decades of suppression, oppression, and government-sanctioned murder. Lament instead what could have been, had the US acted like it promised to on January 8th. Imagine if we lived in a world where the US had allied with the rising wave of protests, instead of letting these tyrants murder them. Alas, we do not live in that better world, where those brave, idealistic freedom fighters, one that those brave, idealistic freedom fighters tried to bring about. We live in this one, a world of principles and nobility lost, of pragmatism, one where the answer to America first is inevitably Iran first. That's the cost of being a leader of the free world, Donald. Others follow your example. You let them fight and die on their own. They'll do the same and move in after, as you did. So when the news carry his call, but fail to mention all those who died due to the previous time he promised to support them, it feels like the news is trying to bury them, to forget them. But it happened. It was real. Ladies and gentlemen, look away from oil prices for a minute. Take a moment and let us remember them. The innocents lost to the Iran massacres, the brave protesters, the innocent children helplessly bombed or struck down from the sky in any nation in the Middle East, the little girls stolen from their parents and homes by monsters to be sacrificed for the pleasure of creepy old men. We all wish we lived in a better world. The thousands who perished in the streets of Iran died, trying to make it better. How can we do less? So remember them. It's the very least we can do. We are all free, or we are none free. Suffer no compromise in this. That's all.